Good evening, or should I say, Buonasera, and a very warm welcome to yet another outing of the Breakfast Show After Dark. Tonight's show features just one film, but it's quite a film. I think you'll agree when you get to see it. Before we get to that, I do need to give you a bit of context. The top-down way system you're about to see was developed by Italian demolition giant Despe. If you're watching the show today, you will have seen that their jumbo Caterpillar excavator has just won a World Demolition Award. I think the top-down way won a World Demolition Award a few years back, but that's a whole other story. I didn't get to see the top-down way system on its maiden voyage, which was over in Lyon in France. But 8-9 years ago, I was lucky enough to get to see it working up in Glasgow. Despe was working in partnership with Scottish demolition contractor SafeDem on the demolition of a pair of identical tower blocks known locally as the Gallowgate Twins. And Gary Muirhead is in the chat. Do you know the Gallowgate Twins? I'm guessing you probably do. It was, I have to say, a really memorable visit. And I came away convinced that the top-down way system was a major step forward for tower block demolition safety. But ever since that first visit, it's been on my bucket list to see the top-down way in action again. Only this time, I really wanted to see it with Despe themselves so that I could truly understand the origins of the system, how it came into being, and how it operates. A few weeks ago, I was finally granted that opportunity. Together with my son Fred, I flew to Milan to see the top-down way right there in action in Despe's backyard. And better still, I got to do it in the company of Stefano Panseri, who is CEO of Despe, the current president of the European Demolition Association, and one of my favourite people in the whole of the demolition world. So that's all the background you need. The film you're about to see has never been seen publicly before. 3 people have seen this film so far. Me, Fred, who made it, and Stefano. That's all that's seen it. So you're about to see it for the first time. If you watch closely enough, you'll see that I do make a very brief cameo appearance. I also provided a tiny little bit of voiceover, but the film you're about to see is really all Fred's handiwork. So that's the build-up and the explanation. I'm going to pull up the film now and play it for you, and then we can have a chat about it afterwards. Now, it is a big file, so I need to get it off my computer, so bear with me while I do that. With the need to remove a tower block from a city skyline, the modern demolition contractor typically has 3 methodologies in its armoury. If there is sufficient space, explosive demolition is one option. Alternatively, and assuming it can gain access, a high-reach excavator might be called upon to munch the structure down from the ground. Or a crane might be deployed to lower excavators and skid steer loaders onto the roof of the structure to carry out a top-down demolition. Each of these accepted methodologies has its advantages and its disadvantages, its pros and cons, its benefits and its drawbacks. But there is another way, a fourth way, and in the right application, a better way. There is the top-down way. Standing 17 stories tall, the Hotel Michelangelo was built in 1971. With a 4-star rating, it attracted tourists and business travellers from the world over. But in 2020, with Italy among the earliest and hardest hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, Milanese authorities converted the hotel into a quarantine facility. But the Michelangelo is now in its end state. Its final transformation will see the hotel slowly, safely and expertly erased from the Milanese skyline. I joined Stefano Panseri, CEO of Italian demolition giant Despe and President of the European Demolition Association, atop the Hotel Michelangelo.
My name is Stefano Panseri. I am the CEO of Despe, an Italian demolition company. We are in Milan in this moment, and we are on the top-down way. Well, at the beginning it was, let me say, something requested by a client. So an international client went to Despe asking an innovative solution to perform a deconstruction of a skyscraper in Lyon. And the funny thing is that at the time, this client was owning some demolition company inside their group, but no one was able to provide an innovative solution for this task. We did some brainstorming internally, and we understood that we already had the solution in-house. I mean, Despe in 2010 already had our oleodynamic circular platform for the control of the deconstruction of the stack inside industrial plants. So the sparks, the intuition was just to use the same technology, but to enlarge this circular platform and to invent something bigger. We started from a circular platform of 20 metric tons in weight, and we arrived at the top-down way that weighed roughly 500 metric tons. The first idea was just to make something more stronger than a traditional scaffolding, because as we know, scaffolding has not been designed to keep heavy falling object. Scaffolding has been invented and designed for other purpose, maybe to keep a man with a box of paint and something very light. So the initial scope was to do something stronger. That's the reason why the top-down way has been designed and equipped with a strong and massive flap able to keep more than 500 kilos for square meters. But during the design process, we understood that finally the machine would become something more complex than a simple, let me say, strong scaffolding. First of all, it became self-descending, so a completely automatic machine. And when you are dealing with automation, you basically deal with sensor. We start adding sensor in order to control the position of the flap, in order to control the sense of the machine itself, the temperature, the oil pressure. Finally, we had more than 600 sensors to be managed and controlled. When we realized the huge quantity of sensors to be managed, the automation was immediately the next step. So the software was the only solution able to have on a couple of touch screen the online situation about how the machine was working and how all the part of the machine was cooperating to get the goal. The first target was to contain falling debris, and that's the reason why we designed top-down way with 3 levels of containment. But as soon as we finish the design, we ask why we don't put some other commodities on the machine. And so let's go to put a system of light in order to enlighten the demolition site during the afternoon and the evening. Our supervisor asked to have power in order to empower the electric tools and avoid to bring the power from the staircase. And that's the reason why we have our generator, and we have a electric distribution system on the floor able to provide power whatever is required. The step after was about the technical gases, was about the water in order to contain dust. So finally, the top-down way is a really sophisticated, self-descending job site who is able to provide all the logistics needed for the demolition itself. Top-down way requires 4 weeks. Once the tower crane is assembled and ready to work, we need 4 weeks to positioning the orange beam frame and all the suspended floor around the building. And so we are operative in 4 weeks. Before the installation, all the building goes through a very deep, let me say, engineering process in order to analyze what is the static and the dynamic situation of a building. Basically, we do something very fair. We use the existing column as lifting point for the top-down way. So we basically transferred the vertical loads of a top-down way through the existing column of a building itself. So basically, we don't change the dynamic and static scheme of a building. And about the 500 tons that we are used to add, you have to take in consideration that before the installation of a top-down way, usually the building has been already stripped out, so we miss all the weight of the furniture, for example. There are no people inside, of course, so we don't have the live load of a building. So we have enough capacity to install the machine, and we don't bother at all the static of the building itself. The team crew is about 10 persons. If we move from Italy to abroad, basically the essential specialists are no more than 6. The 4 people that we use for example, for the cleaning of the flap and for the assistance can be easily reached on site. Due to the fact we are used to cooperate with our international partner. This is the way we are developing our commercial action around Europe and around the world, and that's the way we would like to go ahead.
That is the top-down way, and I knew I could rely on you lot to ask all the right questions. I'm going to go through the chat now and answer these as best I can. I'm not an expert. I've seen it twice, but I'm not an expert, but I'll do my best. Start at the beginning of the chat. Gary Muirhead was first off the mark. In fact, he was here before the show even started. I didn't even know you could do that. Good evening, Mark. Good evening, guys. Good evening to you, Gary. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Mark Whiting's in the house. Andy Dalvell is in the house. Chris Ford is here. Al Grierson is here. And I asked at the very outset, does Gary Muirhead remember the Gallowgate twins? He does. I was up there drinking Italian espresso coffee in the sunshine about 8-9 years ago, I think. Yes, core blimey again tonight. Yeah, this is the end of my working week, I promise. Let's have a look. Who else have we got here? I did see some more people coming through. There is Graham Footy Williams. Tristan Mays, our crane expert. There was a bit of crane in there. Hope you enjoyed that, Tristan. Good evening, legends. He obviously means you lot and not me. Wow, that's great way and safe as well. That was the starting point. It was that whole idea of, well, basically encapsulating the very top of a tower block to make sure that debris didn't fall into the streets below, but also making sure that men and machines were safe as well. Come back to that in just a second. Be a lot of work involved in setting that up too. As you heard, Stefano said, it is a 4-week process. Once the tower crane is in place, it's a 4-week process. All of those sections are lifted. They're all arranged around the building, all locked together, and then the descent begins. Jesus, guy, says Al Grissom, you keep outdoing each other with each new video. Love the footage. It does help if you're working in the Milan sunshine, I have to say. But yeah, Fred did a cracking job. Hard to film, actually, because once you're in it, you kind of it's like filming inside a big room, really. So yeah, I think you made it look awesome. How does this system work? Looks awesome. Right, so you saw the sections that were going around the building that were lifted up by tower crane. Within that area there are 12. There are 12 vertical hydraulic jacks, and they are each arranged on top of the columns within the building. So the same bearing load goes straight down as it did when the building was fully occupied. So if there's a column there, there's a jack on top of it. Everything is vertical. So that's part of it. The bit that you can't see, which is the bit you can only see really from underneath, when you're on the top down way and when you're stood outside the building, because you are off the edge of the building, there is a flap, a hydraulically actuated reinforced steel flap that comes down and basically encapsulates the building. So if any debris should fall off the demolition process, it hits that as a crash deck first. But not content with having one, and as Stefano explained, that can take a weight or an impact of 500 kilograms per square meter. But there's another one immediately below it, and then there's another one after that. So even if, God forbid, a ton of concrete fell off that building and hit the crash deck, it hits one, it hits another, it stops. And the funny thing is, despite all of that, despite all of those promises, I watched the Despe team actually maintaining on an ongoing basis while the demolition was going on. They were maintaining it, making sure that any debris was kept off the crash deck, and they were doing so with a broom, because the actual demolition was so well contained. The bits of debris that were actually hitting the crash deck were about that big. Not a problem at all. But again, I mean, 2 points or another point to point out. My son Fred expressed his concern about working at height. He's not big on heights. Turns out Stefano Panseri, not big on heights either. But even when you're off the side of the building, because you've got these crash decks below you, you can't go anywhere. You couldn't fall off if you tried. It's awesome. Tristan May says, awesome technique, like a reverse jacking system. It is exactly like that. So effectively, the way that it works is, as I've explained, you've got the column of the building, you've got the jack that goes on top. So there's 12 of those. And what they do is they retract one of the 12, and they demolish all around that. They take that column out, they demolish around it, and then they make a flat surface, and then that leg comes down again to take the weight. And then they go move on to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And the building we were looking at there, it was taking them about 3 days to take down a whole floor, so to go all the way around. And all of that jacking is done automatically, and it's all controlled. Even I think I was told it was something like, even if it's out for sort of 9 millimeters from one side of the building to the other, there's a fail-safe in it and everything else. That's the way it works. There was also a bit that you saw where we were going down the side of the building. That process takes 10 minutes. It takes 10 minutes for all of those, excuse me, all of those hydraulic jacks to retract. So you're now down to the next level. I'm just going to clear my throat 1 second. That's better. So yeah, the whole thing is completely controlled. I'm going to say good evening to Glenn Johnston, who also joined us. Now, as I said, can rely on you lot to ask all the right questions. Wow, imagine the possibilities of that system in places like America, where the skyscraper rules the city. So here's 2 things. First and foremost is that in 12 years, that top-down way system has only worked in its native Italy twice. Not because it's not good, because it quite clearly is, but because Italy doesn't have much in the way of skyscrapers, certainly not of an age that need to be demolished. However, as you rightly pointed out, Places like Manhattan certainly do. Despe have been to Manhattan to talk about the top-down way. While they were there, they were asked if they could build something that basically did it the other way around. So rather than going to the top of a building and coming down to demolish it, they were asked if they could devise a system whereby you start at the ground and you build and you are encapsulated all the way up. They've done that, and if you look very closely at Stefano's high-vis jacket, you will see there's actually the name of a project in Manhattan where Despe are working right now as we speak. So there you are. Gary Muirhead says, do they own any Brock machines? I'm not sure if they own any Brock machines, but the machines they've got up on top of the top-down way, couple of things on those. First of all of the machines are 10, 11 tons, so pretty beefy machines. I'm not sure Brock go that big. They may go to 10. I can't actually remember, but no, they tend to prefer their Doosan's, Devellons, and their Bobcats. So that's what they've got up there. The tools they've got up there, though, the main attachment that you saw there was an NPK. That's a 3-ton tool. It's an absolute beast of a tool. It really is. One of the questions I asked was about height restriction on the machines to make sure that they're not banging the upper structure. They've tried that. Didn't particularly get on with it because there's bits of the project where you can work quite freely. So you're basically, there's open air directly above you. There's only certain bits where you're actually under those panels. Everything folds away. There's ladders going up to the next level. All of those retract and get out of the way. So there's pretty much a clear space there. So they don't do that. Let's have a look. Dan Cullen says, that's amazing. Having the power supply above and no cables all over the place on stairs and on walls. The 10th wonder of the world. I actually said to Stefano while we were walking around it is literally like they have thought of everything. You know, it started out as, can we replace scaffolding? Yes, we can do that. Wouldn't it be quite nice if we could have some light up here so we could work in the winter evenings and the afternoons? Yeah, we've got that. And wouldn't it be nice if we could have some power so we could run power tools off it? Yeah, we can do that. Wouldn't it be fantastic if we had an industrial gas line? And while I was there, obviously that building itself was heavily reinforced. So munchy with the machines, in comes the guy with the gas axe. He takes out all the rebar, Bob's your uncle. Everything down the stairwell, as per a usual top-down demolition, with no debris going outside. It's a one-stop top-down shop. Excellent innovation. I really had to work on saying that. Excellent innovation, Despe. It really is. It's one of those things. I've written about it. I've written about it a couple of times. I wrote about it a couple of weeks ago, and I've written about it since. And one of the things, it's not suitable for every building. According to Stefano, it becomes economically viable on tower blocks of 90 meters and above. Much below that, it doesn't make economic sense. It doesn't make time sense because obviously you've got that 4-week setup period and everything else. But above that, so it is literally, and if you'll pardon the pun, it is very much a vertical product. It's not suitable for every application. But those applications that it is suitable for, I have seen nothing, and I do mean nothing like it. It's all totally encapsulated, and I wish it would have been lovely to have taken some of you guys with me, because one of the things that film didn't capture, which is hard or almost impossible to show, was you've got a team of 10 people there. Everyone knows their role, much in it the same as any demolition job. But because everything is sequenced, so hydraulic jack leg goes up, demolish underneath it, it comes back down onto a level place, and then you move on to the next thing. Everybody, from the guy holding the hose to keep the dust suppression down or to keep the dust down, to the guy orchestrating everything, everybody knows their place. Everybody knows their job. Everything is done in perfect sequence. And, you know, the jack leg goes up, busy, out the way, back down again, onto the next one, and you just work your way around the building. The team up there were as good a demolition team as I have seen anywhere at all. Dan Cullen says, very interesting video. Thank you very much indeed. Chris Ford says, a core team of 6 to organise the job. That's some forward thinking. I'll tell you about some forward thinking. Obviously, that right there was in Milan. And Milan is about an hour from Bergamo. Despe are based in Bergamo. So this is a local team on a local project. When I was up on the project at the Gallowgate Twins, They had the same core team, or most of the same core team, working that you saw there. They brought a team in. Basically, the demolition project was won by SafeDem, but the top-down way was done entirely by Despe. So there was an Italian team up top bringing the thing down. Because they were going to be a long way from home and you know, homesickness and everything else. I can't remember. I think they were doing 2 weeks on and a week off or something like that, but neither here nor there. But William Sinclair at SafeDem found a hotel specifically for the Italian team directly opposite an Italian restaurant. And I don't just mean a restaurant that sells Italian food. I mean an Italian restaurant that's owned by an actual Italian with a chef who is actually Italian. I've eaten there. It was as good a meal there as I've had anywhere in Italy. It really was absolutely top notch. And that was all part of it. You know, they have their breakfast, their lunch, and their dinner in the same restaurant to basically make them feel at home. Everything was thought of, much the same as it was thought of actually up on the top-down way itself. Andy Dalvell says, definitely, Dan, keeping the power cables and hoses and such kept out of the way is awesome. Very good for health and safety, helping to eliminate trip hazards. There's another thing. You know, anybody that's in the chat now that's actually worked in demolition will know, particularly if you're up on scaffold or you're working alongside scaffold, there's scaffold poles and there's obstacles and you've got to sort of duck under them and there's bits to step over, and there's none of that. You can get on that top-down way and you can walk around the outside the building. So you're hanging off the edge of the building. You just walk around it, no problem whatsoever. And then once you're actually on the building itself, you're on the building itself. Absolutely clear. Ben Hanratty has joined us as well. Good of you to be here. That crash deck idea is fantastic. You can be as gentle as you can. You're always going to get something go the wrong way. Most of the time, it's pebble-sized piece of concrete. But from 20, 30, 40 meters up, they turn into a missile if not contained properly. 100%. And again, one of the things that it's impossible to show was after we'd been up and filmed most of that, we'd filmed half of it probably. We went downstairs because you know what the Italians are like. They do like a lunch. And I love them for it. We went down the tower, across the road into an Italian restaurant. They just called it a restaurant there because it was in Italy. It's no great surprise. One of the best meals I've ever had. Awesome stuff. But we were there directly opposite the Milan Central Station. So suspended above in what used to be a hotel and was in a quarantine center, maybe 40, 50 meters above the ground. There's 3 machines up there of about 10 tons each, all with big attachments, all munching a building down. You wouldn't know it. Not only does that system, even though it's pretty open to the elements, not only does it contain debris, it contains sound as well. So unless you were actually going to do like a time lapse when the cocoon actually came down, you would never know that building was being munched down. You'd probably, if you worked there locally, you might look up one day and think, that building's got a bit shorter, but you would not know it was going on. Mick Knowlton's joined us as well. Good evening, Mick. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Just like I said this morning, if you've got the imagination, anything is possible. I have enormous respect for Despe as a company. I love the way they go about business. That they are a class act. They absolutely are. Their workshop is as clean and as tidy as any office I've ever been in. The floors are white. The machines are pristine. Every machine they use, including those on the top-down way, once it's finished its job, it goes back to the workshop. It's stripped down, it's repainted, it's restickered, and it is basically made ready for work again. Every machine, even machines that are 4 or 5 years old, they look new. They are pristine and white, and they are in perfect operating order. So I admire them for that. I admire them for the way in which they take a skewed look at demolition. I wrote something recently. We've always done it that way, being the most dangerous phrase in the demolition language. That's not the Despe way. Despe will look at an issue and go, There's got to be a better way, and we'll figure out exactly what it is. Even like we were talking about earlier today on the Breakfast Show about the fact that they've abandoned on-machine dust suppression with the jumbo machine, and they've got these 2 dedicated concrete truck mixers filled with water that place the water exactly where they need it, not roughly where they need it, but precisely where they need it. But the thing that I admire most about them is they don't seem to look at a job and go, what's the easiest stroke cheapest way of doing that? They just look at it and go, what's the best way of doing it? And that's what they devise. And as I say, that system, that top-down way system, has now been used twice in Italy. It's been up in Scotland. It's been over to Copenhagen as well. Lord alone knows where it's going to end up next time. But they've created an absolute one-off, and hats off to them for it. Yes, seen that on the high vis. Can't remember the name of the project. Something Plaza, I think, in Manhattan. I was wondering about the site address in New York, but now you know. I think the largest Brock is an 11-tonner. They're a bit bigger than I thought. But again, they kind of they know what they're doing. I think that's part of it. Don't tell me they got a coffee machine up as well. Now, bizarrely, or maybe not bizarrely, maybe because they have access to it anyway. In Milan, they did not have a coffee machine on board. In Glasgow, however, we got to the top. I went up there with William Sinclair, the owner at the time, the owner of SafeDem. Since been sold to the staff, but he was the owner at the time. I was up there with William Sinclair and John Woodward at C&D Consultancy. Both of those had been up there several times before. So we got to the top, and I think John said, "Would you like a cup of coffee?" And I had a camera in hand. I said, "No." He said, "No. Have a cup of coffee." So I'll have a cup of coffee. And there in the control room was a proper Italian espresso coffee machine. So there we were, the 3 of us, the 3 Brits, all stood looking out over the Glasgow skyline with a proper Italian espresso in our hands. Pretty good way to spend your day. Do they make Italian coffee on top of the structure? Not this time, but they did in Glasgow. I don't know whether that's saying something about Glaswegian coffee. May well be. Love the writing that comes down when you mention Despe. It says death beat. Does it? Yeah, I can't control the captions. Incidentally, when you were saying about the writing comes up, excuse me. One of the other things that they've talked about, you will have seen on the outer 4 faces of the top-down way, they've got like a hoarding, and it's got the name of the development, and it's got their name, the Despe name on it as well. But one of the things that they've actually considered is they have got the ability to, like you see at football stadiums, particularly the London Stadium, so a big LED screen, so you can actually display things on that. So like a hoarding, but an advertising hoarding that gradually comes down with the building. And when they actually started work on that, they had a party in a building about a mile away or so, but they were looking directly at it, and they were actually projecting fireworks and that kind of thing onto this screen. They just do things completely different. Let's have a look. Andy Darvell. I'm surprised they don't have a chef up on top, on top of their way, knocking up pasta 10 hours a day to keep the boys happy. Again, there's another thing with the Italians. We went off for lunch, and I realised that me and Fred were guests, but there was no, we arrived, we were picked up at about 8 o'clock in the morning, driven to the site. It took about an hour, thereabouts. No big deal. Got to the site. There's the site. We've got all the camera gear. We're eager to go. Nope. First, we'll have a coffee. And we had a coffee, and we had a chat with the people that owned the coffee shop, and it was all very, very, very relaxed. Across the road, got the PPE on, got the briefing, went up 3 floors in a hoist, and then we went up through the stairwell to the top. We did a couple of hours. It's lunchtime, right? Go and have lunch. Lunch was about hour and 40 minutes, hour and 50 minutes. Very nice it was too. And I do mean it really was very, very good indeed. And then back up, coffee again, all very relaxed, and the job gets done. There was a guy in the film as well. I so wish we had it on camera, because it is one of the most incredible things I think Fred and I have ever seen. There was a guy. He is basically the site supervisor. He orchestrates the whole thing, and because obviously there's noise up there, there's munching and crunching, and there's a breaker up there if they need it. So there's quite a bit of noise. So everything is done by hand signals. So all this kind of thing. You get the idea. But at one point, the guy was walking towards a guy holding a hose that was keeping the dust down, and didn't look the guy in the eye. Just walked towards him. Hang on, I'll do it with this end. He just went, and the water just stopped. It was. Fred described him as Aquaman. It was like he could somehow control water. Just a wave of his hand, the water stopped, and he walked on through, and had no intention of breaking his stride. He knew that one signal, the water would stop and allow him through. It's like he was parting the waves. I hope there was a toilet up there too. There wasn't, but there's plenty downstairs, and you can get to them very easy. Andy Darvell says it would be good to have cameras on the inside projected to the outside to show what's going on inside. Yes, it would. Yes, it would. Although, again, I think that you kind of have limitations with that, because there are taxis going around serving the station. Do you really want people looking up and what the hell's going on up there? But it is an interesting thing. You've mentioned cameras. So one of the things that we were really keen to capture, and they were keen for us to capture, was the descent. As I say, it only happens every 3 days. So they timed it especially for us. So we got up there, went and had a bit of a look around, and then stepped off onto the platform itself. And at the appointed time, there's alarms and everything else, and then the thing begins its 10-minute descent. So Fred decided that it would be a good idea to set up 3 cameras. So he had his iPhone laying on the ground facing upwards. So the shot that you saw of the ceiling basically descending, that was his iPhone shooting that. I had a camera stood on what was left of one of the old columns. So that was probably just over 1 meter off the ground. And then we also had the big camera, and I mean the expensive camera, on a tripod in what we hoped was a gap. And we basically went down and hoped that the cameras would be okay. Obviously they were. You've seen the footage. But at one point, I actually said, how far down does it come? And they said, it drops about 10 meters. I said, 10 meters? How much does that leave? And they said, roughly 1 meter. Well, my camera, the camera that I'd put on the top of the column, was just over 1 meter off the ground. And when you see it, the ceiling does get remarkably close. It was absolutely fine. They knew what they were doing, thankfully. Gary Muirhead says, just like she said the other day about how you would demolish structures in central London, one of the most heavy densely populated cities in the world, top-down way would work amazingly. Yes, it would. Yes, it would. Again, though, and this is more in praise of the top-down way and the Italian way of doing things, and less a criticism of the British way. But can you imagine trying to explain to the average specifier of a British demolition job that it will take 4 weeks before you even start, because you've got to get the crane up and then get all the sections in place, and ultimately that system comes at a price. It will be more expensive to do it that way than it would be to stick some dynamite up its pipes. Now, you're not going to be doing that in London anytime soon, or hitting it with a high reach, or just traditional top down and hoping for the best. All of those would be fundamentally cheaper. Can you imagine a UK specifier saying, yes, actually, we will pay an extra, whatever it is, £500,000 because we are that keen on safety? I can't see it happening. I'd love to be proved wrong. I'd love to see the top-down way working in London. Funnily enough, there is a building, we drove past it today, a building called Tolworth Tower, just up the road from me. That's big enough. It's empty, needs to come down. I don't know if it's planned for demolition, but if they were going to do it there, that would be really handy, because I could walk there and film it for you. Film was actually autumn best I've ever been. ever seen. Amazing what they can do this day and age. Fantastic, guys. Yeah, they are. They are. And again, I keep coming back, and that was where it came from. We actually discussed this over dinner in Bergamo. We went back to Bergamo, and we went up to the very top of the old town at the top, and we were talking about this idea of we've always done it that way. And I've written a column. My column for Monday, funnily enough, and I don't want to give away too much, but my column for Monday is I've been thinking back, and I've actually been speaking to a few other people as well, people whose opinions I really respect in the demolition industry. And I've been trying to think of major innovations of the last 20, 25 years. And I can't actually think of very many. I had the top-down way down as one. I would also say the quick coupler, oil quick, Lenhoff, steel wrist, because I think that has changed the demolition landscape. Rather than having multiple machines, you now got companies with one machine, an array of attachments, and an oil quick or a steel wrist or whatever it might be. I think that's changed it. But I can't think of anything else. Brocks have been around for longer than that. So, we've already got remote control and autonomous control and all that kind of thing. High-reach excavators, they've been around for just as long. Yes, they're getting taller. Yes, they're getting beefier and everything else. But by and large, the technology hasn't actually changed that much. There's not been a major change in that. What? Can you think of anything else? Because I'm really struggling with it. Let's have a look. Dan Cullen says, no one in the British demo would understand how it works and probably be wrong as the buildings are all weirdly shaped. They can factor that in. It is a modular. It probably works best on a perfect square, but not a problem at all. Dan Cullen says innovations are few and far between in demo at the moment. I have to agree. I have to agree. Inbuilt water suppression on the machine, says Al Grierson. Now, are you talking about on the top-down way, or are you talking about the machine we were talking about, the jumbo? So two things. There is dust suppression. There is hose dust suppression on the floor on which the demolition is taking place. So there's a couple of guys, they're hooked up to water tanks, and they are hosing it down, much as you would expect in the normal way. But in addition to that, the top-down way system actually has its own dust suppression. Thankfully, they turned it off while we were on it, because otherwise we and our cameras would have been soaked. But he was actually saying that most of the people that work on the top-down way don't like working the floor below the top-down way demolition, because that's obviously the water falls and then falls again, and they get wet. And as innovation, hose connects to the counterweight. Oh, I see what you mean. This is innovation. I see what you mean. Is it? In the grand scheme of things, is it that big a deal, do you think? And even, and I mean this in the nicest possible way, I am so impressed with the jumbo machine, and I'm so honored to have been the journalist that got to go and see the jumbo. But even that, it's a big excavator modified for demolition. It's an incredible feat of engineering, but in terms of actually pushing the envelope and real innovation, it's been done before. It's not the first by any means. Garvin from Mostly Digger says UK using top down with all those costs. Somehow the Michael Caine clip of "you're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off" is more likely. Yeah, although again, you would have to say, as I think it was Chris Ford actually said, this is ideal for somewhere like America, where they've got lots and lots of skyscrapers. We've got the same, London, Birmingham, Manchester, and we've got a lot of skyscrapers and big tower blocks that have been around for the right amount of time. And I'm questioning, I'm not stating this as fact, but I'm questioning now whether demolition contractors in the UK know the score and go in based on price, because ultimately that is what the client will decide, rather than, whereas what Despe appear to do is, right, we can do this safely, now let's talk about how much it's going to cost. I realize that most clients in the UK would still go for the cheap option. But I do wonder if we've become so entrenched in that idea of it will come down to cost, but we've still got to do it that way. The quick release arm on the Komatsu High Ridge is a pretty good new innovation. I know it's just the same as quick couplers, but it's next level up. It's a good point. Makes it safer to change arms and a damn sight quicker. Yeah, but I mean, if I remember rightly, I'm fairly sure Kokurik actually did that with an actual oil quick. It was a bloody big oil quick, but they did that on a machine. So nothing. It's an incremental improvement to my mind. Whereas something like that and something like the actual quick coupler itself really does change the landscape. And I really am struggling to think of anything else. Al Grierson says, not super big deal, but a step above some poor guy holding a hose all day long. Totally right. Totally right. And I 100% agree with that. And I love some of these little multi-fog systems that they use indoors as well. Keys will do it on high reach machines. They do, and they do a fantastic job. But all you're doing is an incremental difference. We need to take a boom off and put a boom on. So we can either do it in a day or we can do it in a minute or thereabouts. But it's an incremental difference. Whereas something like the Oil Quick has literally changed the landscape. And I know they don't represent the Oil Quick brand anymore. But ACY Hallmark here in the UK were beating their head against the door in terms of Oil Quick for years and years and years. Could not make any inroads. And then both Armac Demolition and AR Demolition, both up in the Midlands, decided to give it a try. Invested, wouldn't look back. And all of a sudden, the rest of the industry just went, they've got a point. And it has literally changed the landscape. You've now got, we've been referring to Swiss Army knife machines and, tool carriers and all that sort of thing for years, until the quick coupler came along, specifically the All Quick in the first instance. Until that came along, that was not the case. It is now. I've been on jobs with both of those companies and others as well, where, in the past it would have been 2, 3, possibly even 4 different carrier machines. One would have a breaker, one would have a muncher, one would have a shear or whatever it might be. Now it's one machine, and there you've got your array of tools, and it's munchy, munchy, crunchy, crunchy, breaky, breaky, snippy, snippy. And the other thing that I think Oil Quick and the like have done is that they've made it right. They've made it easy to always use the right attachment. In years gone by, you could be munching something down and hit a bit of rebar and think, if I give it a bit of a wiggle, it might let go. All the time you're putting strain on the carrier machine, you're putting strain on the attachment. Now, just drop, pick up the shear, snip, put it back down, back with the muncher. It literally is as quick as that. 20 seconds, 30 seconds, you've got the right attachment for the job. Change the landscape. Now, price number 1, time constraints is another, and the right manpower that understands it is another. And I think that's part of the Despe model. I think that's why they are so keen to have the Italian crew on the project to actually run the thing. I think that's probably a good point. And keys will do it on high reach. I've already covered that one. Mostly diggers. Garvin says, I feel I've seen tower cranes in some country, no idea where, with concrete munching attachments and power packs hanging off their cables. Maybe it was a cooling tower or something like that. I did actually mention this on the show this morning. Another innovation from Despe is they have exactly that. You have tower cranes, and you suspend those attachments from the tower crane, but then to shift the orientation, obviously you've got no rotation capability when you're suspended from a cable. So what they've done is they've put like a power pack above it that has a pair of fans. If you imagine a skid steer, so you've got one going one way and one going the other way, and depending which way the fans blow or suck air, they cause the attachment to basically rotate. That exists. They've used it on cooling towers and big stacks and that kind of thing, but that exists. You're absolutely right, Garvin. It totally is. Graham says, the internet is terrible tonight. I can only apologise. Munching attachments and pulverizers. I think that's a follow-on from the previous comment. You can now see why Despe win Demolition Awards. An amazing company. Yeah. It really It actually is that straightforward. I was on the other side of things many moons ago. I was doing some work both for the National Federation of Demolition Contractors, but I'd also been involved in writing some of the World Demolition Award entries for Erith. And it literally been 1 year. It was an absolute head-to-head. Erith won an award, Despe won an award. Erith won an award, Despe won an award. So fast forward a week, excuse me, fast forward a week, and we're at the Institute of Demolition Engineers. And one of the guest speakers couldn't make it. He basically failed to show up, so there was a gap. And somebody said, "You were at the World Demolition Awards, talk about it." And because I think in terms of football, I basically, in the space of about 20 minutes, I wrote a script which basically was England versus Italy. And it literally was. It was 1-0 to the Italians, and then we drew level, and it was 2-1 to us. But those nasty Italians drew one back, but it came down to the final wire, and in the very last minute, England scored, and Erith did actually win the World Demolition Contractor of the Year that year. So yes, but Despe, I don't know how many demolition awards they've won. They've got more to come, I would strongly suggest. And as just in case you missed it this morning, the Jumbo, which we featured this morning, but we also featured exclusively a month or two ago, won the Plants Innovation category, and well deserved it was too, both for Despe and for Larini, who actually built it. Walden, says Dan Cullen, are all oil quick now, but as one operator said, yes, great job, but some operators wouldn't get out to clean the connections, ended up polluting the hydraulic oil in the machines. There is something in that. I realise that the main selling point of Oil Quick is the fact that you can change attachments very quickly. There's also that notion that it's a clean system because it's when you disconnect an Oil Quick from an attachment, the attachment reseals itself, and the Oil Quick reseals itself as well. All of which is absolutely fine, unless you're one of those operators who then takes that Oil Quick and just dumps it in the mud, in which case all bets are off. Polluting the hydraulic oil. You're dead right, Dan. John Finley is with us. Good evening, John. I think you've missed the fun and games, to be honest, but thank you very much indeed for being here. I saw a big crawler crane with a machine arm on the end with an attachment, and the operator sat at the bottom with a seat, levers, and screen operating. It's his only Darville. Super long hydraulic hose running from the pump on the ground all the way up. Bugger changing that one if it blew. Awesome innovation, though. Dead right. Not enough crawler cranes about the place, in my opinion. I'm surprised Armac not been thought of these innovations on demo, as they usually come up with some things. I think their expertise lies elsewhere. I mean, obviously their nickname is the Bridge Busters. I think when it comes to taking down bridges, there isn't a company in the world to touch them. Priestley over in Canada would probably give them a run for their money, but I think they are the absolute supremos when it comes down to bridge demolition. And I think, if when you look at the way, there are certain similarities there actually. When you look at, I've been on a couple of bridge demolition jobs with Armac now, and when you look at the way that they sequence the jobs, everyone knows their role. They have backup machines on backup machines, and even like when we were down at Wembley, to make sure that their guys they're based in Birmingham or Solihull, to make sure that their guys were well looked after and well fed. They basically had, I wouldn't go so far as to say it was fine dining, but they had a guy who was basically cooking 3 or 4 fresh, proper, and I do mean proper, it's bloody good, proper meals just off site. So come lunchtime, you could go out there and you could have your lasagna and chips, and you could have your salad, and everything was fresh, cooked to order. Brilliant. There's certain similarities there. And I think the biggest similarity between Armac and Despe, they do it right. Not a lot to ask, is it? You wouldn't have thought. Good evening, John, says Gary Muirhead. Not Gary, John. Obviously, we've played the film. It's 11 minutes long. It's been and gone, but you can watch it on catch up. But that's us done. We're out of comments. We're out of film. We're out of time. It is nearly an hour. How do we turn an 11-minute film into an hour? I blame you lot for asking bloody good questions, to be perfectly honest. Right, I'm going to remind you very quickly, no show tomorrow. I'm back on Monday with nothing quite as spectacular as that, but I'm sure we can come up with something. Guys, I really appreciate you being here tonight. I realise not everybody is involved in demolition, and obviously this is very much a demolition system, but I really appreciate you being here. Thank you very much indeed for that. Dan Cullen says, another great show. Well done again, Mark and Fred. I just press the buttons. Fred does all the donkey work. Good night, guys. See you on Monday, says Andy Darvell. Often wonder what the true maintenance cost of Oil Quick and the rest is. If anybody knows, let's have a chat about that at some point. An hour well spent in good company. Thanks for the show. You're more than welcome, Al. Thank you very much indeed for giving up part of your evening. Yeah, well done, guys, says Andy Duffel. Stop talking, people. I've got to go and have some dinner. See you all soon. Stay safe and have a great weekend. I'm going to stop. Right, okay, everybody, go and have a fantastic evening. Have a great day tomorrow without me. Have a fantastic weekend. I'll see you on Monday. And again, really appreciate your company tonight. And let's end on that. Gary Muirhead, who was first on the mark. Actually, I'll come back to that. Job's a good one, says Chris Ford. And I'm going to finish on Gary Muirhead. Another fantastic show tonight. Couldn't have done it without you guys. Many thanks indeed. I'll see you on Monday. All the best.